Happy Friday, everyone. Alyssa Knight here. As you can see, this is a very special episode of Aite Radio where we are going to be incorporating video into our weekly podcasts. This week's episode, we're going to be interviewing Gabriel Gomez, the Chief Information Security Officer for a defense contractor called Expansia. Gabriel is going to be talking about his role as a CISO for a defense contractor, some of the challenges that he faces in his role, and we're going to talk about some of the latest cybersecurity technologies and the direction that he thinks those technologies are going. So grab that cup of joe, sit back, relax, and join us for yet another episode of Aite Radio coming up. All right. Well, Gabe, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are, what you do, why you do it.
How much time do you have? That's a good one. Let's see. So, as you guys know, my name is Gabriel Gomez. I go by Gabe, so Gabe's fine. I'm currently the CISO for a small cyber architecture and government contracting group out of the Boston area called Expansia. Expansia is a defense contractor, like I mentioned, where they do a lot of good things. So I am just on the side of cyber. So as a director of cybersecurity there in the CISO, I worry about things internally and externally. But I do support a client, which is the Foreign Military Sales Group out of the Air Force's Logistics Command in Boston.
Cool.
Been in cyber for, probably about 10 years, just an all-around geek who just likes things cyber and tech. And I like sharing the word of cyber. So whenever I get a chance, I try to do things like, get on podcasts or host my own podcast and just share the word, just try and educate as many people as I can on cyber and the threats that we face every day.
How did you get to becoming a director of information security or CISO? How did you work yourself? Did you work your way up from being a cybersecurity engineer? Did you work yourself up the ladder, or did you just decide I'm going to be a CISO one day and apply?
No, that's a great question. So I did start out as a security engineer. But my path into cyber, and I think if you talk to 5 or 6 different people, you'll probably get 5 or 6 different paths into cyber since we're such a new industry. But my path, I was a project manager for a while on the IT side, and I just said I need to be able to get hands-on with the technology. I need to be able to not only talk the talk but walk the walk with the technology if I plan to lead some of these projects. So I kind of took a step backwards and left project management and became a security engineer, where I would go out to different environments and do what we call IVMVs, independent validation verifications. So I got hands-on servers and workstations and network devices and so on and so forth. And as most people in cyber know, that you're running STIGs and doing things like that. So really just checking the security posture of the networks. And I did that for, I want to say, about 5 years. And
So
as
that's like you were doing like diet cap and night cap kind of stuff.
Yes,
Oh my!
exactly.
You're shocked. I know what those
Yes,
are.
yes,
I'm shocked with myself to actually remember
yeah,
those
yeah.
things. But
Die
yeah, that
cap,
was
disc cap. Yeah. So that
disc
was,
cap, night cap.
yeah. So we were fortunate enough to go through the exchange from diacap to RMF, and the world that we live in now is RMF. So as the kind of the time evolved and I became a lead on certain programs, and just over time started to pick up more and more leadership roles, and then the transition to the position that I'm in now was, I was kind of a senior manager at my previous company, and was kind of running some stuff. And I said, I understand both things. I understand the business aspect of cyber, and I understand the the cyber and the technology portion. And I think that's key to a good CISO, is understanding both the business aspect of what it is you're trying to secure or harden, and then obviously the technology. So I was just kind of fortunate. I think I was in the right place at the right time, and just fortunate to have opportunities come about.
So if you were giving advice to anyone on how they can break into cybersecurity, what advice would you get? Let's say that They have, maybe they currently work in tech support, help desk kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have any technical background at all. Would what is the path, right? What is the career path to being a cybersecurity engineer? Do they need to first become a server admin? Do they, system administrator? Do they first need to become a network engineer, to get the
Mhm.
security stuff? How would you, if your child was coming and saying, Daddy, how do I become a cybersecurity engineer? What would that path be?
Yeah, so great question. We actually we did a podcast on this earlier, and kind of breaking into that, and we broke it down into two different kind of entry paths, if you will. So the beautiful thing about our industry, and anybody that I'll will listen, I will tell that our industry is still very new. We haven't had a full spectrum of people who started in this industry and retired in this industry, and
That's a
started
good
as
point.
yeah,
That's a really good point. Yeah.
so we have that, we have that ability where people are coming from different parts of technology, whether they were, like you said, net admins, server admins, they were just programmers. All of these things are now bleeding together. And so the opportunity to get into the security side and cyber side is great. It's one of those career fields that has a 0% unemployment. There's tons of jobs that are out there that, are going unfilled because there isn't talent. So what I would always suggest and tell people is, depending on where they're starting from, if you're already in tech, it's a little bit easier to make a transition into cyber because you understand certain portions of the career field. Um, but let's say you're not in tech. What I always suggest people do is get a foundation. There are certifications out there like the A plus, the Network Plus, Security Plus, which are basic foundational courses that are key to any other course that you're going to take or any other path that you plan to take within cyber. And a lot of people think that cyber is just strictly hacking. It's not. There's so many other things that you can do in cyber, and it's not just all of us sitting at a terminal wearing hoodies and you know
I knew you were going to say that. I was like,
yeah.
either hoodies or trench coats and rollerblades.
Yeah, no, none of that. So, a lot of stuff is what I'd like to see is now, the techies are getting a seat at the C-suite tables, and that's great. And businesses actually, you know, taking a serious look at cybersecurity and technology as a business function, not just a service they use. So it's coming full circle. It's really an interesting time in our career field.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what you think about this, but I've always believed, and I'm glad you mentioned the certifications thing. And I have definitely interviewed people where that's all they really became was just someone with a bunch of acronyms after their name,
Mm,
and I've definitely interviewed the people who were CCNA, CCIE, all the Cisco certifications, but they couldn't tell me what the headers of a packet were, and I
yeah.
think and I think there's definitely both sides of that. There's an extreme in both directions.
Hmm.
And I think the certifications are good as long as you're actually learning while you're studying, right? So, one of the
Absolutely.
things that I've always sort of pushed was the CISSP, not because you should have one,
Hmm.
because you have that piece of paper on the wall, but because of what you learn studying for the CISSP, right? It's
Absolutely.
it's it's kind of like a mile wide and an inch
Inch
thick,
deep.
right? With
Yeah.
all the domains, and the CIA triad, understanding confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and those tenets. And some of the other things that it covers, like network intrusion detection, which I get is kind of moving towards the direction of network threat analytics and machine
Hmm.
learning. You do get a mouthful of drinking from the fire hose of
Yeah.
all of the security technology, that sort of thing. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. What I would say is, if you're asking me, my 2 cents is definitely looking at the maybe possibly starting out with the CISSP, having a really good understanding of networking, meaning the TCP three-way handshake,
Hmm.
how computers communicate with each other, understanding that there's all of these packets, at the lowest layer of the OSI model, and how computers communicate. to then looking at things like, okay, where do you want to niche yourself, right? Because you can't be a jack of all trades, master of
None.
all.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
yeah.
or none, either
Yeah.
master of all or master of none, right? So, you have people within the industry that will niche themselves. So I want to be a penetration tester. I want to be an intrusion analyst. I want to be a forensic analyst, and so
Right.
they'll niche themselves. But you're right. There are some folks who are like, I just want to be a generalist. I want to be a
Hmm.
general senior cybersecurity engineer. If you throw me at installing a firewall or throw me at installing a DLP solution, the next day I can do a pen test. The next day I can look at the SIM logs or SIM events.
Right.
So I think there's definitely the generalists out there, but you do definitely see a lot of people niche themselves. Or like, I want to be a reverse engineer. I want to do malware forensics, or I
Yeah. I
want to be,
mean, and that's again, that's the beauty of our career field
yeah,
is, you can be in cyber and you can do everything from, reverse engineering malware, or, doing the A&A aspect of, RMF, or whatever it is that you like. And that's again, the beauty of it is that you have time to kind of, traverse through all of those different, paths or pillars. What I call them is like, you've got pen testing, you've got forensics, you got, and all of these pillars within cyber kind of, eventually they meld together. And then, we're looking at things like AI and cloud and all the new, industry buzzwords. But getting a foundation in those things, like you mentioned, networking, basic hardware, basic security, that is key to being able to go wherever you want. So if you have,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Because I mean, how can you be a penetration tester and not know what Apache is?
right,
Like let's say you've popped a web server and you want to, for some reason, Apache crashes, or you want to change something and you need to restart Apache. You need to know how to do that,
yeah,
right? I have I have this story very early on in the 90s when I was sitting in, when IRC was a thing. I was sitting in Pound Hack, and this script kiddie came in
yeah,
saying that this individual just defaced a website, but they did something where they wanted to restart Apache and they didn't know how to do that. It's like, okay, you're running around, basically hacking into companies and defacing their websites, and you don't even know how to restart Apache.
yeah,
So it's like you said, the basics, the foundation is incredibly important,
yeah,
and you need to know how to do these things. You need to know what a packet is. You need to know what a payload is. And then once you determine what you want to do, if it's being a penetration tester, if it's being a forensic analyst, then you can know what certifications to go after, right?
right.
Because the OSCP from offensive security isn't going to make much sense if you're a forensic analyst.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, and that's the other thing. There's so many additional certs that you can take, or paths that you can. I say certs because it's a body of knowledge. You're with a certification. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can do it. Like we've probably experienced in our careers, where someone's even has the CISSP and they don't know, how to turn a machine on, period. And I'm like, how did you even take a test? Like, I don't
yeah,
get it. But it's that they've been exposed to a body of knowledge, right? And a lot of what we learn and a lot of what happens in tech, changes so fast, and it changes daily. And if you're not kind of, playing with it, or having a piece of something going on with it, it's very easy to kind of get left behind. And it's kind of very easy to get legacy. So if it's if you don't enjoy learning constantly and improving yourself, then I would definitely push you away from this industry, because you have to stay relevant.
yeah, you have
It's
to be following,
yeah,
what's going on Twitter,
e-
following dark reading. You have to be,
exactly,
you know, j-
exactly,
2 hours ago, it just surfaced that there's a new hardware-based malware affecting Intel CPUs.
yeah.
It's You have to constantly be keeping an eye on things and learning.
Yeah,
That's definitely,
if you're not a current events person, or you don't, want to sharpen your skills, whether you set up your own lab, or you subscribe to something, or then you're really not going to be successful. I think it's people like you that are going out to, you're doing it. You've found things that, people definitely need to know about, and are, I'm sure everyone wants to know about. But you're staying relevant and you're doing new things, and you're constantly evolving, which is what you have to do. You have to do that in this industry because, and
0-day exploits come out every day.
every day, and it's the good cop, or the cop theorem, or the cop robber theorem, where the bad guys are constantly figuring out new ways to do things, because you put up a fence in front of them, they're going to figure a way to get around it, and now you've got another vulnerability. So it's constantly changing, and
True.
there's more bad guys than there are good guys, I think. And so we're already kind of fighting a war with our hands tied behind our back. So uh,
Yeah, it's funny. I love that quote. Cybersecurity engineers have to get it right all the time, and
right.
bad guys only have to get it right once.
Once. Yeah,
It's
that's
it's
very
an
true.
unfair battlefield. That's for sure.
It is.
Is a CISO as a buyer is somebody that's continuously looking at the latest security technologies, the latest security
Mhm.
controls. There's a lot happening within the cybersecurity space. From
Tons.
what I see really becoming legacy at this point, like pattern matching intrusion detection systems, the old network IDS, old snort days,
Yeah.
uh, moving to network threat analytics powered by machine learning. You have now the idea that antivirus is becoming legacy too, and
Mhm.
that's going in the way of EDR,
Yep.
right? Everything really seems to be moving towards machine learning and trying to lower or eliminate the event fatigue, address the issue of a lack of talent in security
Mhm.
engineers. Teams are getting smaller. There's the global talent cybersecurity shortage is a real thing.
Oh, it's real. Yeah.
What is your position as a CISO as it relates to the latest technology trends? So, are you one of those CISOs who doesn't want to look at a security technology unless it incorporates machine learning? Are you one of those CISOs that says, okay, if you're using signatures, if you're using patterns, I don't want to look at you. I really just only want to look at things that are powered by AI or
Yeah.
ML?
So I'll answer that in two parts. I am the type of person, because I'm techie by nature, is I've realized early that a lot of the the new ways of getting things. One, obviously, like you said, to address the talent shortage, we're doing more with less. We're trying to have AI, you know, tell us things, or to look at user behaviors, and do certain things like SOAR, where we're I go back to like if then statements, back in the day, where if this happens, then this is the next thing that was to kick off. So I see these things, one, because of the lack of talent, and two, because businesses, corporations, whatever, even governments, are doing more with security data than they ever have before.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
there's more data than ever before.
There's
I'm
tons.
always telling people that data is worth more than oil these days.
Yeah, it is big time. And so
It's gonna be
before, it used
crazy.
to be like, okay, like you mentioned like snort days. Okay, yeah, I want to look at some logs, but I don't, all I want to make sure is that there's nothing active. But now people are requiring to say, hey, give me some information on, some analytics on the data that we're tracking. Are we seeing certain packets of information containing certain payloads, or what are we looking for, or and the people that are ingesting this information are getting smarter, so they're demanding more and more analytics, and more and more automation with this stuff that's coming out. So I did a little deep dive into the SOAR platform.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought up SOAR.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just did a peer list panel on
Nice.
SOAR,
Yes.
and it's funny. I know you did a comment on the thread with my Ashes to Ashes article on SOAR,
Yeah.
and the question of did SIEM fail to live up to the SIEM dream? And security orchestration really kind of fills that gap that
Right.
SIEM solutions left, where there's no correlation between the non-IT processes and SOC playbooks. So a lot of
Hmm.
security operation centers don't have playbooks.
They no.
They are operating off of just fly by, what I call ready, fire, aim,
Yeah.
mentality. There's no playbooks in place. And SOAR really brought that platform to get SOCs thinking about the fact that, hey, maybe we should have a playbook and here's a way to automate
Hmm.
that. What is your position on SOAR? What do you, where do you see this going?
Yeah. So I mean, I think I'll first start out by saying this is the second part of my job as a cybersecurity architect is, looking at developing SOCs for, in this particular case, other nations for weapon systems, whatever the case is. So I have to look at the maturity model of that particular customer, right? SOAR is something that I think is a very advanced feature. One, in that if you don't have trained personnel to really, know what they're doing with it. Obviously, it takes a little bit more, even though it's automation, you still have to configure, watch things. You have to get those playbooks put in place, and you need to know your environment in order for those playbooks to matter, right? If you don't have that level of maturity in cyber, I don't think it's a thing for you, um,
Hmm.
or for your organization. I think it is something that you should be working towards, because it is that type of technology that's going to drive a lot of your business decisions, and some of
Manual processes.
yeah, a lot of those things that, hey, when you get to that certain level of maturity in your SOC or your CSOC, or um, then I think you should have it. But I'm a from what I've seen, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's doing a lot of different things that I see our industry moving towards, is a lot of that automation by use of AI and machine learning, and that's great. And that's one way that we're filling that gap of qualified personnel, and constantly being on the forefront of what's changing. So I'm all for it. I love it. But I think there is a certain level of maturity that your organization has to be at in order for it to be effective for you. Does that make sense?
So, so if an organization doesn't have a SOC playbook, you don't recommend they go out and implement a SOAR solution. That they should have a lot of these processes ironed out. They should have a lot of these things ironed out before they try and apply technology like SOAR to it.
Yeah, definitely. They're if they don't know their environment, if they don't know what anomalies are, or they don't know what their traffic levels are, or all the things that SOAR would trigger, and that's just one of thousands. But if they don't know those kinds of things, then adding another technology would really just muddy the waters for them. Is that
Yeah.
you really, and that's just incident response, and I think is, if you know your environment, knowing what is not normal is half the battle, right? When you're looking
Right.
at stuff like that. So
And a
if
lot
you
of CISOs don't know their environment.
yeah,
I mean, as you being a CISO, I'm sure your first mission coming into role was, what the hell do we have? What am I
right,
trying to protect? And
right.
where is it located?
Yeah, and who are the actors, all those things, and that's and then what that impact to business is, and that's what I'm realizing, a lot lately, as I talk to other CISOs, or I talk to other cyber professionals. Period, is it's the business functions that they're trying to meld with, and let's face it, business, cyber exists because somebody somewhere is doing business, right? So we as cyber are there to kind of protect and fortify that ability to do business. So um, we have to think about those things in mind. And so with the SOAR, and even UEBA, like looking at like entity and user behaviors, and the analytics around that stuff, I think that should come before SOAR, because you're at least understanding, again, baselines, right? That's the huge thing. What is your baseline? And if you're understanding that, and you have a decent hold on that, then yeah, let's look at throwing SOAR on top, and you know um, again, your level of maturity dictates what kind of tools you're going to kind of bring in. um, I,
Sure.
I don't really like, I'm a gadgets guy. I'm like, oh gosh, look at the new shiny button for me personally. But I know that that's not a win for companies just to have this stuff willy nilly if they don't one understand their environment.
Yeah, and there's a lot of new shiny buttons out right now.
Tons.
20 years ago, there was no such thing as EDR. 20 years ago,
Hmm.
there was the idea of breach and attack simulation solutions,
Yep.
BS, that wasn't around. So there's a lot of new product space within cybersecurity and a lot for CISOs to throw their budget at.
Hmm.
What would your recommendation be to us, to the CISOs out there that are looking at all these shiny new toys as it relates to their budget? Should they just kind of get out of that mind frame of the shiny new toy and trying to figure out first what it is they need to solve, what
Yeah.
problem they're trying to solve?
Yeah, definitely knowing your baseline, what it is that you're trying to solve by asking the simple questions, who, what, where, when, how, all those good things about your data. You know all that stuff. You have a firm grasp. Your continuity of operations is kind of solidified. You know how things are supposed to work. You're somewhat mature in that already. Then I would look at possibly, going and buying the shiny button. The shiny button thing is not always the best thing. It's really something that you need to look at closely. Is it something just because it's shiny and new, but if it comes into your environment and it breaks what you currently have, then shiny and new now costs a lot more money than just, not having it at all. So you really kind of have to understand and play around with certain things at the time at which you're ready to do that.
So you definitely wouldn't recommend they buy the technology and try and figure out the problem it was purchased to solve.
As long as they got a lot of time and people,
I've seen,
yeah.
I've seen that. I've seen that. Something, a technology being bought, and then after it's been bought, okay, let's go find the problem this was supposed to solve.
Yeah, no, let's not do that. I mean, it depends. I mean, how much staff do you have? How much time do you have? How much money? I know, and I've talked to some guys that have an astronomical budget. Like, they could, I'm like, man, Tony Stark, it's awesome, but if that's you, okay, but most CISOs don't have that ability. They're not, we're not quite there, I think, as an industry where, we've got very large budgets. And again, it just depends on, your company and, all the different constraints that your companies have. But yeah, please don't put the cart before the horse by doing
Yeah,
that.
definitely. With the changed threat landscape, a lot of the we're in a day and age now where the large monolithic applications have been broken apart into microservices. You've got the
Hmm.
average number of APIs that a company runs is around 420 APIs. You have
That's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. And then
420. You remember
400,
when it
the
was like
average
two?
number of APIs is 420.
Yeah,
And
that's
I just
crazy.
read something that Jeff Bezos went and made a company wide announcement very early on and said that effectively, if you are creating an application or you have data or you're creating a service within Amazon, you are
Hmm.
required to make it into a microservice and publish it, make it available to other people via APIs. And it was this hard shift towards an API direction. And if you developed an application or you had create something and you didn't do this, it would mean the end of your job at Amazon. Like that's how serious Jeff Bezos was about implementing APIs.
Yeah.
Akamai just recently came out and announced in a study that 83% of their traffic is API traffic now.
Jeez.
Akamai is a massive CDN. So
Yeah.
you're now moving to a point where a majority, more than half of the traffic on the internet is API traffic.
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night as a CISO?
um, Mostly is people. Um, I think your biggest threat to any organization
Your
is your
employees.
your people, your employees. Are they adequately trained, staff, supported? That kind of stuff keeps me up at night. You know, Knowing that stuff is changing. Are we evolving as we should? And I mean, I know we're always going to be one step behind, but how big of a step is that? Have we done enough to kind of fill as much of that gap as we can? So with things like APIs and I think while intended, they're great. Again, there has to be some kind of framework around how you develop things and stuff like that, which is obviously doing it securely. But those types of things kind of worry me. I'm kind of weird in that sense that I know technology is fantastic. We need advances in technology, but there's always that time frame where something takes off and it's still vulnerable. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
as the adoption of APIs are happening, and that's great. Eventually everything's going to be able to talk to everything, I think. But there's still that gap that we really need to be looking at, making sure that we're securing a lot of these pathways. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Is Jeff Bezos saying that because he wants market adoption and everything should be able to talk to each other so he can sell more? Is it more
What was the
functionality?
driver,
Yeah, what
right?
was
What
the
was the
driver, Jeff?
business driver behind? Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. A lot of security engineers come in, I think, waving the big heavy sword.
Mhm.
Lock it down,
Yeah.
secure it, and they don't understand that that's an old mentality. The cybersecurity is supposed to enable the business. I'm sure
Right.
that's what you go in every work today, or you work from home, but wake up every morning and yeah, beats a commute with traffic. But um,
Yes.
the
Thanks,
I'm
Expansia.
sure. Yeah, I'm sure every day that's the thing that you need to remind yourself of, and really remind the teams of, is that we're here to enable the business. Without the business, we don't have a job. So it's not about locking everything down. It's managing your risk.
Exactly.
What are the assets within our environment that pose an unacceptable risk to the business? What
Mhm.
risks do we have? Because you're not going to completely eliminate risk, right?
No.
So that's definitely another recommendation I would offer to anyone wanting to get into cybersecurity. You're not going to completely eliminate risk. It's treating risk to an acceptable level to the business.
Exactly.
So much to your point, I don't know what the impetus was behind that move, whether what within the business was the enablement there. But I would imagine, unlike, unfortunately, and this is where something I really stress with a lot of folks, is not just enable the business, but enable it to actually perform business securely, right? Not just
Yeah.
enable the business, but conduct business securely,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
everything we do. And APIs is a great example, where a lot of companies are getting their hands slapped right now. They're taking black eyes and bruises for launching and making APIs available to the internet without properly securing them, thinking that a web
Mhm.
application firewall will secure their API traffic. That's not
Yeah,
what WAFs were designed for. They're
exactly.
it's the, you need to put an API security gateway like 42 Crunch or whatever it may
Mhm.
be in front of that API. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. What keeps you awake at night? It sounds like
Well,
humans. You're the
yeah, and the other thing is, and most companies are starting to kind of embrace this, is distributed teams. Prime example is, most of my team is, all over the
all over the
country.
United States, right?
Yeah, and so that's that in itself kind of brings some new challenges and things that you know uh, are they authenticating to the network enough to get patches pushed? Those kinds of things, like, because they're distributed. Other than an agent based kind of platform that I'm looking at or doing something I'm getting reports on, I can't, they can function from a home network, where back in the day, like, in order to do your job, you needed to be on the corporate network, and the corporate network itself kind of provided security and kind of a blanket of things, because you could push updates, you can, control GPOs and do all that stuff, where now, they're obviously needing to get on the network, but if we don't educate them about the risk of not authenticating, getting the patches, doing all those things to the network so that all that can happen, then they're leaving themselves open, and they're going to take the path of least resistance because their job is not thinking security. They're thinking HR, they're thinking, finance, whatever it is that their job function is, that's what they're thinking. And
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that up because that was my next topic I wanted to ask you about before we close out, and that's zero trust. What is
mm,
what at what point are you in implementing zero trust at your company, and what does that mean to you? Do you see zero trust as layers like network segmentation and microsegmentation, network access control, not trusting the device, not trusting the user, or have you said, you know what? I'm not doing anything with zero trust right now. What is your angle from the zero trust security topic?
so for our environment, we're not really focusing on zero trust, because our environment is not really that big. We can handle the numbers that we have. I've seen zero trust models, implemented, but we're talking about, a couple hundred to 1,000 nodes, and that I think there's a place for it. Again, it has to fit, your it has to fit your infrastructure. It has to fit how you're designed to operate as a business. Um, if I deny all and it causes one person to lose functionality for, I don't know, an hour, let's say, or something, then what's the trade-off there? How much did we lose as a business? So again, I think that it always is situational dependent. If if you're at that level of maturity where you can implement it, then I definitely see, I see a purpose. I see an opportunity for things like that to evolve. I've also seen things like, other platforms. I don't know if you've ever heard of. It's more of like, not the software defined network, but it's, what was the actual terminology they were using? A software defined roll our back. It was like I'll have to look it up. Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared for that one. But there is a company out there that's looking at things, and they're looking at changing, the authentication methods that we use to get onto networks and the trust models and those kinds of things. So it it really just depends, and it has to happen, organically. It has to happen that, some you're ready for your environment's going to that route, and then if it fits, it fits. Like for my particular case at our company, we're not big enough.
Yeah.
We just don't have to do that at this point. I'm not taking it off the table by any means, but I think at this point it would be a little bit more troublesome than
Throwing a
value.
Volkswagen at a nail.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the other thing is, we're small and lean, and so, we try to do things, you know, in technology the same way as we try to do things lean, and we don't have a lot of room for, the bloat technology that's out there. That's like, hey, well, let's be on the forefront now. The other role that I feel is, that is actually our jobs, is to go out and evaluate these types of, software platforms, or the latest and greatest, and to be able to then come back and say, hey, we've looked at this technology. It should be something that we can roll into our CSOC platform. And again, does it fit every organization or every customer? No, there has to be a certain level of maturity. Once they meet that level of maturity, then these products will apply. Or you have to have your core services, your SIEM, that kind of stuff. And then you can look at adding on SOAR and all that later on.
Not trying to fit your organization to the technology, but the technology to the organization.
Yeah, and a lot of CISOs get into that role where they're like, oh, but we got to have this because we know that it works well with our antivirus. Well, so what? Like, you don't necessarily need to have the full suite of things if you're not ready for it,
Yeah.
or pay. Again, if if you have if you have the budget, if you have the time, if you have, the staff to kind of sit and play with those
Operationalize
things,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
because you need people to sit in front of the dashboard. You need people to sit there and play with it.
Yeah,
Make
it's so much more than just buying a new piece of technology. There's downtime for the people that are working in order to learn something new. I don't care how user friendly it is. They have to incorporate it in your environment. So there is that little bit of a curve of how it operates in your environment. What kind of pitfalls are there? Are there certain configurations that need to be changed because they break other functionality? All of that is time, and all of that is money. So it's a lot more than just the cost of a subscription or a piece of hardware, software, whatever the case is.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, one final question. Do you think that passwords will eventually go away with these push notifications on your mobile, like MFA, and you've got Okta and you've got Trusona? Do you see passwords eventually going away?
I think passwords are the equivalent to bunting in professional baseball. It's a dying art. People would much rather in baseball, people would much rather hit a double or go yard than to bunt and move the runner. I think that's where we're kind of going with passwords and authentication methods and all that good stuff. I think we'll see a lot more. And again, this just me. I'm no Nostradamus, but I think we'll see a lot more multi-factor kicking in. We'll see a lot more biometrics, something that cannot be as easily thwarted as a password. There are instances where a password is sufficient.
Like
And
service authentication, you can't implement biometrics with,
yeah,
MS SQL service trying to.
yeah, there's certain applications that will probably use, but I don't think that you know 10, 12 years ago password was everything, and then we went from single passwords to passphrases and all these
Right.
different things. And as we evolved it's still what I tell people is, if you're going to use a password, use a passphrase, special characters over 15 characters, blah 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 blah. But yeah, I think it's the dying art of cyber here shortly.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking time out to be on the show, and
No worries.
I'm looking forward to you starting Binary Barbershop back up. You have to do
It's
that,
coming. It's coming.
and
If you
I
guys can
have to be
see,
your first guest. I have
yes,
to be your
I'm
first guest.
game. I'm so game for that.
Cool.
Yeah. So I apologize for our listeners that are out there. We took a little time off, but I promised everybody we'll be coming back with season 2. So it's coming back. It's interviews like this with Alyssa that's fueling the fire and getting us ramped up again. So
Talk about Binary Barber. Tell everyone what it's about. What's it like? Give the pitch on the Binary Barbershop.
Yeah, so Binary Barbershop was started as a way to teach cyber and tech in a simple manner to people, much like they would if they were going and getting their hair done or, at the barbershop, where you're just having a conversation and you're just talking about things, in a layman's terms. Cyber affects us all, but, there's a lot of tech speak in cyber, and, people think that, oh, in order for me to understand cyber or really understand the threats that I face, I have to be techie. And that's not true. You just need to have things explained in a way that you can understand it. So that's our aim, is to kind of take these topics or these current events and break it down to the layman's terms as much as we can, and then just make it interesting. One of the biggest things that we hear is like, I never would have thought about that topic had you have not mentioned it in that manner. And so that's kind of what we try to do, is to break it down, make it simple. In the Marine Corps, we would say that's trying to break it down Barney style, so everybody gets it. But
Love it. Love it.
yeah,
Awesome. Purple dinosaur.
that's
Cool.
it.
Well, you need to bring it back. Like I said, I want to be your first guest, and
No, that's awesome. As you guys can see, I look at it every day when I come and
I
sit
know
down.
I see that banner.
Yeah, the banner's up there, and I was like, all right, so
Got to
I'm
remind.
I'm pot committed.
Yeah, you got me all nerding out over the replacing all my podcast hardware with
Oh
the
yeah,
new.
yeah, yeah. Listen, I had a nice conversation earlier today about about gear, and I think we spent like, I don't know what, 30 minutes just talking about podcasting equipment. And
And I got
you
my
know,
Shure SM7B cardio
there it
dynamic
is. That
microphone,
sure mic, man.
that
Yeah.
cloud lifter mic activator. It was funny. I did not know this, but I don't know if you know this as well. But the SM7B microphone was actually what Michael Jackson used in Thriller. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
He
No.
totally used it.
Ah,
Michael Jackson used the Shure SM7B in the movie in his video for Thriller and the Thriller.
that's amazing.
I
I know a lot of like studio guys, they use that mic. And it was kind of like when we started Binary Barbershop, obviously we were like, shoestring budget. We're like, let's just get the cheapest mic that we can get.
yeah,
Let's just, we use our cell phones, we'll use our cell phones. But I think I actually stole my son's Yeti mic back from him. But he was a gamer, and I'm like, give me that mic back. I need
give me
that.
that mic.
But yeah, so he's
Yeah.
like, Dad, give me my mic back. And I was like, yeah, okay, we have mics now. So yeah, the SMB7
And
is
it's not that expensive. It's $399. You've got the Cloud Lifter, which is 149.
yeah.
That
One place I will tell you they get you is on those mic stands. Those boom
they
stands are like,
do. They
yeah, they're like
do.
$200 for a boom
It's
stand. You're like, damn it.
crazy. I know.
Yeah,
I did. One guy on YouTube did recommend the Rode PSA1 swivel mount studio mic boom arm.
yeah,
That's $98. So it's
yeah.
yeah. I mean, you're right. The stands are expensive. You could
They
easily
are.
spend a few $100 on a stand.
Yeah, and again, it depends on your setup. Like our initial setup here, like the desk I'm at right now is a one of those kind of rising desks or whatever. So I would have to use something that like a boom mic that's gonna not hear all that stuff as things are moving around. So some people can get away with that. Some people actually are using overhead mics now, and
Right, right.
podcasters are coming along, man. Podcasters
High
are
tech, man.
it's high
It's
tech,
like a
no joke, man.
Hollywood film studio. They got
I'm
the mics
telling you.
coming down. Now we're
Yeah.
adding video to podcast. What would that be like?
Yeah.
Podcasting? Is that what you would call
Yeah,
it?
vodcasting, man. It's
Podcasting?
it's it's awesome. But like I told you earlier, I have more of a face for radio, so I'll limit my exposure
You're a
on
handsome
podcasting.
guy. What are you talking about?
Oh man, I'm just grayed out. So, but anyway, it's all right. That's
Awesome.
cyber. That's what that does to you. And I'm
Oh,
kidding.
you know what? Okay, my practice director Gwen will
Hmm.
would kick me if I don't ask this question. Okay, so putting your CISO hat on,
Okay.
what kind of cybersecurity research would you like to see out there that really isn't really being covered that much?
Ooh, that's a good one. Like topic specific or
Yeah,
type of
topics.
research?
Like topics. What kind of topics would you really like to see
Hmm.
in-depth analyst coverage of this year?
That's a good. Obviously, the way things are going is more cloud security.
Sure,
That's
sure.
just because that's been my event for the year.
Yeah,
Um,
workloads, like you got Kubernetes, you got
Kubernetes, Dockers,
containers, Docker
yeah,
images.
that kind of stuff, and the kind of the security around the cloud the cloud configuration tools, like you mentioned, like Puppet, Chef, all those guys. Um, getting that. Obviously, that's a big one. I'm trying to think of another one.
Yeah, you're right. There isn't much in the ways of. I mean, there's cloud security research, but getting into the minutia, getting into the weeds of it, like how. Okay, I've got a whole bunch of Docker containers out there. How do I
Mhm.
secure them? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, and I know one of the challenges that we faced earlier was not only cloud security, but cloud security automation,
Mm,
and getting things, being able to be, configured and automated and those kinds of things, because we're pushing those environments to everyone to kind of go there for all the great benefits, but we still haven't quite replicated the on-prem environment per se. So I think anything along the lines of whether it's sec DevOps or cloud security in general, I'd be game, and I'd definitely be listening to. So if you plan on doing any of that, let me
Just
know.
between you and me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's coming out. Maybe a couple episodes from now. I don't know.
yeah.
But
No, I
yes,
definitely, yeah, cloud security is definitely on my research calendar, content
yeah,
calendar for this year. So,
yeah. So tell her I
um,
said, and anything else that she wants to produce. I mean, I'm game. I'll read it.
cool. Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate you're a loyal fan. I
That's
appreciate
it, man. I'm
you
loyal. I
following
know how hard it is to
and
grind.
to
So
get content out there. All right, Gabriel. Well, you take care and stay out of trouble. And we appreciate you having you being on the show today.
no worries. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome.